Hey, what's going on everyone? It's Eega again, back with yet another Disney Lorcana video. No card of the day video today. Today I'm going to be talking about Duel Masters. Oh wait, that's not right. Or is it? Now, the reason why I brought up Duel Masters is because there are a lot of similarities between Duel Masters and Disney Lorcana. The other day, I was kind of looking through Duel Master cards, kind of a bit of nostalgia thing, right? I was like, oh man, I used to love this game. So I was looking and I stumbled upon this card right here. This is Aqua Hulkus. It's a 3-cost, 2,000 power character that says when you play this character, you can draw a card. But why would I throw this up here? Does this card look familiar? It should, because it's a lot like Sorceress Maleficent, who also has 3 costs, has 2 strength and 2 willpower, so we got those 2s. But when she comes into play, you can draw a card. So that got me thinking. I was like, wait, are there other Duel Master cards that are a lot like Disney Lorcana cards? And there are. Let me show you some examples here. First up, we have Brain Serum. Brain Serum, as you can tell, is a lot like the card Friends on the Other Side. They're both a sort of action card that when you play them, you can draw 2 cards. Now, I should note that Brain Serum has this kind of keyword called Shield Trigger, and you had these 5 cards put down in front of you from your deck when you played Duel Masters, and your opponent needed to break all 5 of them, plus attack you 1 more time in order to win the game. But if you got to take those cards from your shields, I should say, into your hand. But if a card from the shields has what's called a Shield Trigger, you can play that card for free. If that doesn't sound familiar, it should, because singing songs is also another way to play these cards for free. So another similarity there, right? Now, Brain Serum does cost 1 more resource, but regardless, they're both action cards that let you draw 2 cards, and they both can be played for free. We also have this card, Dark Reversal, which is another shield trigger, and it gets a character from your discard pile to your hand. That's the same as Part of Your World, right? The song card, and also to a lesser extent Hades, but more so Part of Your World, because they're both action cards that can be played for free, and that get a card from your graveyard or your discard pile to your hand as long as it's a character. Removal wise, we have Death Smoke and Terror Pit, which are a lot like Dragonfire, right? Dragonfire is kind of the combination of both of these put together, but essentially, you just remove a character, and both Death Smoke and Terror Pit were in the base set. So I think Dragonfire is sort of like a mesh of both of these put together. And so that's why I included both. But I think it's so similar that I put this on here as well. We also have Bronze Arm Tribe. You can see here that Bronze Arm Tribe is basically Detective Mickey. If Aqua Hulkus was Sorceress Maleficent, then Bronze Arm Tribe is Detective Mickey. 2 other cards, we have Natural Snare, which is also a shield trigger. And it's a lot like Let It Go, where you can put a character on the battlefield into your, the whoever's resource zone, I suppose. You could target your own stuff, target your opponent's stuff, whatever. But again, very, very similar. Now, the final card I should mention isn't from the base set, but I thought it was so good that I had to include it here. It's called Phal Eega Dawn Guardian. And if you look, its effect, when played, you can put a spell from your graveyard to your hand. But in Disney Lorcana terms, you would take an action card from your discard pile and put it into your hand. That's what Lady Tremaine does. It's basically the same. It's the same thing. The cost is very similar as well. There's another example too from the second set, and that's evolution creatures. My favorite is probably Barkwhip the Smasher. I always love this card. He was so good. But he's an evolution creature, which is simply a shift mechanic, right? You could pay a couple extra, or you just pay the resources, and you can put that card on top of one of your other characters. I think you had to you had to put the evolution creature on top of another creature. You couldn't play it separately, but it's still an evolution mechanic where you take a card and put it on top of another card from Duel Masters that has translated over to Disney Lorcana, right? Now, with this being said, there are cards from Duel Masters that have mechanics and keywords that we haven't seen in Disney Lorcana. So I picked out a few cards that I really, really like with good mechanics, with good keywords that I think will make its way over to Disney Lorcana in some way, shape, or form. Now, first up is a sort of recursion ability where if a character is banished, you can return it to your hand. These two cards, we have Aqua Soldier and Chilius the Oracle. Now, you can notice that their cost to power ratio isn't very good, but their strength lies in that whenever they're defeated, they just go right back into your hand. Very, very handy. So you can either keep like destroying your opponent's shields, or you'd be able to say use them for resources, you know, after they're defeated, if that's something you want to do. In Disney Lorcana terms, you'd be able to basically keep questing with these characters or keep challenging with these characters, you know, provided you're able to keep paying those resources every turn. And if they are inkable, you'd be able to say use them for a turn or two. If they're banished and you need to play something more and you have nothing else to ink, just ink the card that came back to your hand. Very, very handy. I do like the mechanic that when something is banished, it goes back into your hand. I think that's going to make its way into Disney Lorcana. I do think the characters would be higher statted for their cost. So like a 3-cost character that has 1 strength and 1 willpower and maybe quest for 1 lore. I think that would be fair. We don't want it to be like too strong for recursion, but just something simple where it comes down and your opponent's like, oh man, I need to devote resources to get rid of that, but I'm not even going to get rid of it. It's just going to come back later on, right? It's kind of like Detective Mickey, where Detective Mickey comes down, he gets you the extra card, and your opponent doesn't want to remove him because he doesn't do anything. He just quests for like 1 lore. This mechanic would translate very well to these 2 cards with a bounce mechanic, because your opponent's like, well, I don't want to remove it because you're just going to get it back, but I can't necessarily ignore it because you're just going to keep gaining resources. So it puts your opponent in a tough position, and I like that. I love this mechanic, and I hope it makes its way over into Disney Lorcana. Another mechanic that I do really like, and we do kind of see it now, but not in this regard, is exerting your opponent's characters on your turn. Let me throw up some cards here from Duel Masters. We have Moonlight Flash, Virtual Tripwire, and Meili, Vizier of Hunting. We have 2 cards that are action cards or spell cards, and then Meili, who is sort of like a character with the same effect. Basically, when you play these cards, you can exert one of your opponent's characters or 2 of your opponent's characters or whatever. Now, we did have a card. There's another card here I should mention. It's called Holy Awe. Probably my favorite card in all of Duel Masters. You got to exert all of your opponent's characters. This is very, very good. I do like this. I think though that Holy Awe's strength was that it is a shield trigger, and it could tap all your opponent's characters so they could stop attacking you. And I think that's where its true strength lied. Although you could use it on your turn, exert all your opponent's characters, they have no blockers, and you go for the win. Either way, you know, that's another card. I guess I probably should mention that I think about it. But yeah, that just exerted all of your opponent's characters. Regardless of Holy Awe or not, I think playing a card and exerting 1 or 2 of your opponent's characters is going to be very, very good. We do have Elsa. You're right, we do have Elsa. I know that's what you're thinking. Elsa is a permanent ability though. Elsa can be used all the time. Yes, you have to exert her, but by paying the price of just exerting her, I can use her effect on every single one of my turns forever, unless she's banished or, you know, challenged in a fight or, you know, whatever. If she gets removed from the field, then she's gone. But otherwise, I can keep using her. These cards are a one-time effect, especially Meili, where he comes down and just exerts something. I really like that effect. I really, really hope that we see a character that, when played, exerts one of your opponent's characters. That would be really good for challenging. Right now, if your opponent has, say, 18, 19 lore, and they just quested, and then they play a character, and they have 1 unexerted character, and on your turn, if you're able to get rid of all of your opponent's exerted characters, but not that character that's unexerted, that feels bad. You're like, I have no chance at this. At least, you know, let me have a fighting chance. Outside of removal, outside, you know, like Let It Go or Dragonfire or something, and then outside of, say, an Elsa exerting that character, or I guess also you could use Aladdin, Heroic Outlaw Aladdin, to swing the lore into your favor. But without that card, there's no way to remove that character on the field, the unexerted character. But by playing cards that can't exert those characters, you at least have a fighting chance. I like that a lot. I don't think we'll see a ton of cards with this ability in the first set, but I do think it might show up. I hope it's not an Amethyst. I hope it's in something like Amber or sapphire. Give it to another color, maybe even emerald, you know, for tricky plays or something. Don't give it to amethyst though. We already have an exerting. Let's spread it out. You know, you can see here we have 2 yellow cards and a blue card. You know, let's give this ability to another color. However, the point being is I love that I have a chance to interact with my opponent's unexerted characters through spells and through character abilities, and I really hope we see more of that in Disney Lorcana. And based on these cards from the base set of Duel Masters, I think we might. So another mechanic, I did want to bring this up. I don't know if I'll talk a ton about it, but it's searching your deck. You can see here, this card is called Crystal Memory, which was also a shield trigger. You could just search your deck for any one card and put it into your hand. Now, I should mention that Disney Lorcana has a minimum deck size of 60 cards. Pokemon also has a deck size of 60 cards, and they have searching mechanics. I should also mention Magic the Gathering also has a minimum 60 card deck, and they also have searching mechanics. There are certain cards that search for lands and search for, you know, specific cards, search for characters, you know, whatever, but they have searching mechanics. Duel Masters only had 40 card decks, and they had several cards that let you search your deck. Some cards let you search your deck for a character. Some cards let you search your deck for any card and then put it into your resource zone. Some let you search for a spell or an action card, right? And then you have Crystal Memory, which let you search for any card. I actually really like this in Disney Lorcana. If anything, it's because our deck sizes are so large. Like I have played a few games, right? I have a few games under my belt, and I have added 4 copies of a card to my deck, and I've never seen them. I have played games where I'm like, oh, I forgot I added this card into my deck. Sometimes you just don't draw your cards, and they might be needed, right? They might be important for your core strategy. Now, we do have a very, very good mulligan system. You can look at basically like the top 14 cards of your deck and then pick 7 of them and then shuffle the rest. I mean, you know, that's kind of what you do. So you are able to see quite a bit of your deck, but there's still a chance you just don't. And I think being able to search your deck for one card isn't a big deal. It is a 1-for-1 exchange. I do have to play this card, you know, get rid of it, so I'm down a card, -1, to search my deck for a card and add it to my hand. So now I'm +1, but that equals out. There's probably some cards that are very, very good to get, right? Board wipes, removal, etc., etc. However, I do really, really like that. I mean, base set Duel Masters, as you see here, had a search card. Base set Pokemon had a search card. I don't think it's a big deal. I think being able to search your deck for any one card should be fine. And that's a mechanic I would like to see in Lorcana because the deck sizes are just so large. If it was like 40 cards, I don't think I would, especially with the mulligan system. But I don't see a big deal being able to search your deck for a single card. I'm just afraid that if they do make this card and it's only given to like one color, like amethyst or sapphire, it might make that color the go-to color. I know amethyst right now is the go-to color. If there isn't card draw in other colors, you almost have to play amethyst, which would be, feels bad. That's not good. But either way, it's just, I like to see this mechanic. I do hope we're able to search our decks. Another mechanic from Duel Masters that we haven't seen in Disney Lorcana that I would like to see is a bounce mechanic. Now, yes, we do have Cruella de Vil, and Cruella de Vil does sort of have a bounce mechanic, but take a look at these cards. This is Spiral Gate, Teleportation, and Unicorn Fish. So again, we have like 2 action cards and a character, just like the tapping abilities or exerting abilities from earlier. Basically, you just you choose a character and return it to its owner's hand. I love this mechanic. Probably right up there with exerting. If exerting a character is like my #1, then being able to bounce a character is probably my #2. I really, really hope we see this in Disney Lorcana. Because if I'm not able to exert my opponent's, you know, unexerted character to stop them from winning, give me the option to at least buy myself a turn so they can bounce it, so I can bounce that card to their hand, and now I can at least stabilize. Maybe I can figure out something else to do on my next turn, but at least give me a turn to figure it out. I think it'd be really good defensively, like in the scenario where you're stopping your opponent from winning. Also offensively, where maybe you bounce your opponent's bodyguard character and then challenge all of their other unexerted characters. It's also good to set your opponent back a turn. Like I said, if it's, turn 8, they have 8 resources, and they play Mickey Mouse, and they're sitting at like 15, 16 lore, bounce that Mickey Mouse back to their hand, right? Buy yourself a turn, figure it out. I love this. I love this mechanic. I really, really hope it shows up in Disney Lorcana. I don't mind if it's on a character or if it's on an action card. However it's done, let me pick and choose to return a character to its owner's hand. I outside of, say, Corella's banish effect. And we just speaking of Corella, we have that effect. We do have a bouncing mechanic. It's already in the game, but it can never be triggered if your opponent just ignores Corella, right? Give me the option. Let it be in my hands. Let me pay a couple resources, play a Spiral Gate or something, let me bounce one of your characters to your hand, or I can bounce one of my characters to my hand to reuse the come into play effect, right? Let me do that. Either way, I think this might show up in Disney Lorcana, and I think it would be good for the game if it does. So another mechanic we may or may not see. I know I don't like this necessarily in Magic the Gathering, but I should just make a quick note. We do have cards from the first set. You can see here, this one's called Ghost Touch, and this one's called Masked Horror, Shadow of Scorn. And they discard cards, right? When they're played, your opponent discards a card. That could be really, really powerful, especially against a deck that, say, draws a lot of cards, but also more so powerful against people who only have 1 or 2 cards in their hands. You play this, and now their options are severely limited, right? It does feel bad. I know that, I like to play Commander for Magic the Gathering, and one of the deck types that people don't like to play against is hand discard. When you play Commander, you're mostly playing for fun. I play in a casual setting, no competitive. I play casually. And seeing somebody have a Commander that, is all about hand discard, you're like, oh, this isn't fun, right? You're like, I don't even want to do this because I'm here to at least play my deck. And when someone else is playing a deck that makes it so I can't play my deck, that's not fun for me, right? Let me play my big characters. Let me do my cool stuff. Then we'll see whose deck is better in that regard, right? It feels bad when you can't play your cards because you're just discarding them. I bring it up because it was a mechanic in Duel Masters, and it did have a couple cards that did it. It might show up in Lorcana. I don't think it'll be huge. Maybe every so often, your opponent plays a character that makes you discard a card. That's probably fine. It is what it is. But I don't want to see a lot of stuff built around it, I suppose. Because if the game is meant more for an audience of a family, younger children, whatever, more family friendly, I suppose. It's not fun to not play your cards. Let me play my Elsas. Let me play my, Auroras, whatever. Let me play them. But again, it's just a mechanic from Duel Masters that could make its way to Lorcana. And now another one that I really, really like. I love this mechanic. It's probably my number 3. It's characters with a cost to stat ratio that's really, really high. Here, let me put them on the screen. Look at these guys. This is Artisan Pkora, Explosive Fighter Ucarn, and Onslaughter Triceps. Man, these names are just crazy, right? But if you notice, their cost to power ratio is really, really good. Artisan Pkora is a 1 cost, 2,000 character. Now in Duel Masters, right? In Duel Masters, that was really, really good. Usually it's 1 power for 1,000 power. So a 2 cost character would have 2,000 power, baseline, etc., etc. But you notice that these characters just have really, really good stats at the cost of destroying one of your resources. And I like this mechanic, and I really hope it shows up in Disney Lorcana. There's a couple reasons why. One, on my first turn, if I want to play a resource and then play a 1 cost character that has 3 strength and 3 willpower and quest for 1, but it destroys one of my resources and sets me back a turn, that's fine. Let me do that. We have Captain Hook. Captain Hook can challenge into those characters and have a very good trade for you. Now, outside of Captain Hook, yeah, there's really nothing else on a turn 1 play that can deal with that, but it doesn't really do a ton tempo-wise. It is strong. You're not going to get a ton of value from it, I suppose. It is a good play. I think it would be a really good play, but you have the chance of losing that character early. Also, you're setting yourself back a turn just to have a 3 strength, 3 willpower character into play, at the start of the game. So I'm not sure how that would look exactly, but I love that idea, especially for higher costed characters. Let me play a 3-cost character with 5 strength and 5 willpower, but I have to get rid of one of my ink to do that. So let me go back a turn or something. That's fine. So I like that power aspect. I think that's really cool. On top of that, now if you're keeping track of cards you ink and where they are, you could play these cards, target those cards that you might need, and send them to your discard. If I'm playing sort of like an Emerald Sapphire deck and I ink, say, Let It Go, like right away, and then later on I'm like, oh, I need that Let It Go, I could play like Artisan Pkora or something, some 1 cost. Fine, like I know where that Let It Go is. I banish it to the discard, and then I play like Lady Tremaine to get that card back because I know where that card is. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think putting cards like in certain areas is fine. It helps you with memory. Like you could be like, okay, this pile has my characters in it, this pile has my action cards, whatever. I don't necessarily think that's cheating. That's weird. It's like because it's still helping you with the memory. But in all the games I've played, it's never been an issue, to be honest with you. I do keep track of like my opponent's removal cards. If they do ink Let It Go, I'm like, okay, my opponent put Let It Go in there. Or like now they can only have 3. Also, like if they ink like a 3-cost Jasmine, I'm like, nah, whatever. 3-cost Jasmine, it is what it is. They put an Ariel in there, I'm like, meh, it's Ariel. But if they put like Maleficent or 8-cost Mickey or something, Aladdin, I'm like, okay, all right, now I'm keeping track. So it's not a big deal, but I don't see why you can't mentally keep track of your own cards that you put down. They're still face down, and you still put them down. Your opponent saw them. It is what it is. So being able to destroy those cards and then move them to your discard, I think adds like a higher level tier of play, and I do really like that. I also like putting characters into play with really, really good stats at the cost of something else, right? Typically removing ink from your inkwell. Now, I did skip over these, but there are cards in the first set that also have the same effect where their cost to stat ratio is really, really good, but you have to essentially banish one of your other characters when it comes into play. I do like the mechanic too, but I don't see it fitting into Disney Lorcana. I see destroying your inkwell being used more than, say, banishing one of your characters in order to play another character. We might see that effect on, say, a villain. That could be. I'm not ruling it out, but it's still another possibility where instead of, playing a 1-cost 3/3 that destroys an ink, I could play a 1-cost 3/3 that I have to banish a character. And it could banish itself, so you can't play it on your first turn for free. You have to target itself. But either way, the whole point being is I really like playing a character at a higher cost, higher stat-wise, but for an additional cost. Destroying a character, banishing an inkwell, whatever the reason might be. Another mechanic that we might see in the first set of Disney Lorcana, we might not see, is being able to attack or challenge your opponent's unexerted characters, but only in specific scenarios. So check out these 3 cards. We have Chaos Strike, Gatling Sky Terror, and Nomad Hero GGL. All of these cards allow you to challenge, essentially, we're doing Lorcana terms, but they allow you to challenge your opponent's unexerted characters. Now, this wasn't like super common in Duel Masters. No one really did this a lot. A lot of the game was played with, say, blockers, which were like bodyguards. You could put a blocker down and your opponent couldn't attack your shields without going through the blocker if you chose to intercept, right? Which mostly you did. It might be too confusing knowing that certain cards can attack or challenge unexerted characters. However, if this is put onto like a character, if a character comes down and it has like, I don't know, Menace or something, I don't know, whatever it's called, and it says this character can challenge unexerted characters, which basically means this character can challenge any character on the field, I think that's cool, right? Now I think about it, yeah, I think this isn't probably terrible. Being able to challenge your opponent's unexerted characters should be fine. I like that a lot. What we could do is, like, you can see that this is red. Let's give, certain cards certain abilities or certain colors. Let the red cards, let Ruby be able to challenge unexerted characters. Let Amber cards be able to exert my opponent's characters through spells and character come into play effects, and then maybe, you know, Amethyst has characters with exert abilities or something that can do other things. But you see what I'm saying? Let the cards have their own identity, but still able to deal with a similar threat. You know what I mean? Maybe there's a card in Ruby that banishes all characters on the field. Or maybe there's a card in Emerald, but instead of banishing all characters, you instead return them to your hand, right? Same effect, everything's removed off the field, but it's slightly different, you know what I mean? I do like that, so I think being able to challenge your opponent's unexerted characters would be a really fun keyword or ability that could definitely show up in the first set of Lorcana. And again, it provides more interaction, where if your opponent is at that 18 or 19 lore and you have nothing you can do, that feels bad. You're like, well, my whole turn means nothing. I'm just gonna scoop and let's move on. But if you at least have a shot, you know, you have a card or ability that could attack or challenge an unexerted character, I like that. And I think that should make its way into Disney Lorcana. Another card that I would like to talk about, and we do already have this, but I would like to see it in a lesser form. This is Meteosaur, and you can notice that Meteosaur is a lot like Dragon Form Maleficent, Monstrous Dragon, where, you know, when Maleficent comes down, you can just banish any character. So when Meteosaur is played, you can banish a character or destroy one if it's within a certain power range, right? And I think I would like to see other characters with come into play effects like this. Give me a 5 or 6 cost character that maybe instead of banishing any character, I can only banish a character with cost 3 or less or something like that, right? And we do, you know, we have seen cost stuff, you know, we pay costs for things. I don't see that being a big deal printed on a card. I would like to see that. I would like to see more come into play effects, which I'm sure we will. But I do want to see more effects, you know, like Meteosaur. I know it's the same cost as, say, Dragonfire, right? But maybe Meteosaur could be like a 6 cost card that has like 2 strength and 2 willpower, quest for 1 or something. But when he's played, you can banish a character with 3 or less or something like that. I like that. I would like to see something like that. Just a cheaper cost Maleficent, but maybe stipulations behind what you can banish. So another card or a mechanic I'd like to talk about, this is my second to last one. I'll put these guys on the screen here and you can see the theme. We have Mighty Shouter, Coiling Vines, and Red Eye Scorpion. Basically, you can see that when these cards are banished, they go into your resource zone. Simple as that. I really like that because, one, you're essentially getting a resource, an extra resource for free, but only if your opponent banishes it. However, these cards would help you progress towards winning to get the game, right? They're going to have lore, they're going to have strength and willpower, they're going to help you challenge, they're going to help you quest. Your opponent is probably going to want to deal with them before they get out of hand, especially if something like Red Eye Scorpion can quest for like 2 lore. That stuff can add up quickly. And you can also use these characters to just challenge into your opponent's characters. Your opponent's going to lose their characters, they go to the discard, but your characters are going to go into your inkwell, which grants you more resources to play bigger characters, you know, in the future. Love this mechanic. I really, really hope this shows up in the first set. I think it's going to be really good. It's a very simple mechanic too. You're like, oh, my character got banished. Well, I'm just going to put it in my inkwell, you know, face down and exerted. You know, maybe not even exerted. Maybe he just goes there unexerted. Who knows? Whatever the reason. Either way, right? Either way, really fun mechanic. I really hope it shows up in Disney Lorcana. I think it'll add a lot of depth and strategy to the game as well. So finally, the last mechanic that I would like to talk about. This one's kind of like, it's another ramp. I'll put these cards on the screen. You can see we have Poisonous Mushroom and Thorny Mandra. And when you play them, you take a card from your hand and put it into your resource zone. So they themselves don't go into your resource zone, and they don't get a card off the top of your deck and put it into your resource zone. You play them, and you take a card from your hand and put it into your resource zone. The reason why this would probably be really handy is for inking those uninkable cards, right? If you're holding like a couple copies of Lady Tremaine in your Emerald deck, you might not need those, especially early in the game. If I have a 2-cost character that when played, let me put a an extra card from my hand into the resource zone, you know, my inkwell, I'm going to put that extra Lady Tremaine in there, because otherwise that's going to be a dead card in my hand for many, many turns. And it could even be a bad play if I don't have any action cards in my discard pile. Yeah, she could still quest for probably some decent amount of lore, at least 2. But, you know, when you play a character with a come into play effect, you want the come into play effect to come into play. If that doesn't happen, that feels really bad. I'm not saying I haven't played the Sapphire Scar to get, you know, to not use his effect, because it doesn't matter. I'm not saying I haven't played him to at least get him on the field, but it feels bad when you do that. You're like, I want to use my ability. Why can't I do this? But these cards, this weird interaction, right, of taking a card from your hand and putting it into your inkwell can be really handy. I really like that. I like that it opens up, I guess, decks where if you have a lot of uninkable cards, but you do have like these type of characters or these type of card abilities, then you can at least ink those extra cards and still be able to play your other cards. I like that. I think it's really, really cool. And that might be something we see in the first set of Disney Lorcana. So with all of that out of the way, that about does it, I suppose. Those are all my really good examples of cards from the base set of Duel Masters that could show up in Disney Lorcana. Again, I have provided examples of cards already from Duel Masters that have appeared in Disney Lorcana in one way, shape, or form. And using that basis, we talked about some other cards that very well might show up. As a little disclaimer, not necessarily a disclaimer, but as a bonus segment, I do want to talk about a mechanic called Speed Attacker. Speed Attacker showed up later in Duel Masters. It wasn't a first set thing. I don't think it came out till like set 4 or 5. Basically, Speed Attacker allowed a character to attack as soon as it was played. You pay your resources, you put it down, and then it could attack. I bring this up because we do have White Rabbit's Pocket Watch, which introduces the keyword Rush, which allows your characters to at least challenge right when they're played. So I do think we'll probably see characters with the Rush keyword already on them. So essentially speed attackers that are at least able to challenge right away. Probably can't quest for lore. I don't think we'll see any mechanic that will get you lore like immediately on your turn, because I feel like the game wants your opponents to have some form of interaction. And if you're like sitting on your turn, you're like, okay, I've taken care of my opponent's board. You know, there's nothing they can do to win. They can't get to 19 or 20. I'm sorry, they can only get to 19. But if your opponent's like, okay, I'm going to play Abu, and when Abu comes into play, I gain 1 lore and you lose 1 lore. And you're like, what? I don't have any, there's nothing you can do about it. And I don't think they want to include that in the game. Stealing lore, I think, has to be done, you know, with your opponents able to at least do something about it, unless like you give something like Aladdin Rush or he's shifted, but you can kind of see that coming, right? That's something you're like, okay, my opponent has an unexerted 2-cost Emerald Aladdin in play, and they're going to have 5 resources on their next turn. They could shift into that Aladdin. I need to be really, really careful. And even if they do that, at least on your next turn, you can deal with the Aladdin. But a come into play effect where it's like, I gain X lore, I don't think it's going to happen. But I'm going off topic here. Speed Attacker from Duel Masters is Rush from Lorcana. And I do think that's going to show up. Like, we know it's going to show up, but I think it's going to show up on a character. So, all right, that's enough rambling. That was just all my thoughts and whatnot of cards from Duel Masters and abilities and whatnot that I think will make their way into Disney Lorcana, because 1, I provided good examples at the beginning of the video, and 2 of the co-designers for Disney Lorcana worked on Duel Masters, and I think it's difficult to leave some of those mechanics behind. And you know, they're great mechanics. I don't blame them. Like, bring them over. I love Duel Masters. It was awesome. I used to play all the tournaments. You know, I went to tournaments down in Origins, and I won Ohio's city championship. I'm not sure if Ohio had more than one because it is a city championship, but I won the city championship near me. I went undefeated. It was a lot of fun. Absolutely love that game. So Disney Lorcana means a lot to me. Being able to kind of revisit Duel Masters. So seeing a lot of Duel Master abilities and keywords into Disney Lorcana just brings back a lot of memories, and it like gives me another shot at playing the game, and I absolutely love that. So, but hey, let me know what you think about everything I said in the comments. below. If you're like, oh my gosh, that makes a lot of sense. You can always check out other Duel Master cards, right? I mentioned Shift is a lot like evolution creatures from Duel Masters. I'm sure we'll see a lot of other keywords and abilities later on as the game goes on. Duel Masters only had 8 sets, so there's not a lot to pull from there. I haven't looked at Kaijudo in depth, but that might be something I do just for fun. But I at least wanted to talk about similarities between Duel Master cards and Disney Lorcana cards, I suppose. So anyway, hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. You stay safe out there. Make good decisions. And I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.